I have been working at the Mediterranean Sea for more than 10 years now. But in the last few years, I have seen how the underwater world has changed. The question of what threatens this unique habitat got louder and louder. One of my goals is to show the beauty of the sea, especially of the Mediterranean Sea, but I also have to talk about the threats of this unique habitat.
My name is Lovina Fulgrab. I am an oceanographer, and my passion is about feeling and acknowledging the power of life in all their forms and processes. The sea really helps me connect with my essence. To me, it feels soothing, gentle, purifying, exhilarating, fascinating, empowering, a bit like a caring, beautiful, yet powerful mother. The connection to the sea is also physical, since it resonates with my body, mainly composed of water. My work is about understanding the functioning of a wide variety of marine Mediterranean ecosystems, identifying the pressures that they are facing and trying to provide guidelines or solutions to help for their protection and restoration. I feel very blessed to carry out my work here in Corsica, an island nicknamed the Island of Beauty. After a biology degree, I just felt this urge to interact with the ocean and discover its different faces in other parts of the world. So I got to learn diving, got involved into local marine projects in different parts of the Caribbean, and finally came back to Europe to carry out a master's degree in marine resources and environment. While I could not witness with my own eyes how the marine environment changed over the last 50 years, it is usually considered that the Mediterranean Sea was, in the past, home to a more thriving, abundant and diverse sea life than it is today. While some species in Corsica completely disappeared or strongly decreased, such as monk seals or seahorses, other populations have expanded, such as groupers and brown meagres. On the other hand, though, clear trends do characterize some physical and chemical aspects of the marine environment, such as sea level rise, acidification, or seawater temperature rise, especially since 2010. So the worldwide marine traffic will also involve the release of ballast waters in the Mediterranean Sea. So as an example, there is this parasite that has led to the depth of a mussel called Pinna nobilis, at least in the northwestern Mediterranean Sea. And it is assumed that this parasite comes from ballast waters of a tank of a Japanese boat in the Balearic Islands. So that's one of, I guess, the greatest examples of how a non-native pathogen has created epidemic, basically, in the Mediterranean Sea.
The stocks of red corals are decreasing in the Mediterranean Sea. There are several reasons for this. On one hand, it's the way people fish today. They use invasive methods, for example, bottom trawlers. On the other hand, there is marine pollution or sedimentation, which causes the animals to literally suffocate. And finally, collecting the animals as a souvenir. Because red corals has this unfortunate privilege of preserving the color when dead. Once destroyed, the corals recover very slowly. It takes hundreds of years. They only become sexually mature very late. Before they reproduce, they are collected or destroyed.
One example of species that got extinct here in Corsica is the monk seals. Monk seals were hunted down by fishermen because they were competing for their fish stocks. And so there are still some places that are named after them, like the monk seal cave, because they used to live there, but they're not there anymore. We know here that some fishermen really do not like dolphins, for example, because they would eat the fish that are still in the fishing nets, and some of them would even shoot them down if they have a gun on board. So, yeah, not all of them, of course. Some have a great consciousness of the sea and do fish in a very eco-friendly way and take care of so that the resource is being renewed and preserved for the future generations. But unfortunately, it's not always the case, and you also see this kind of behavior.
My goal with my job is basically to teach people about the ocean, not just scuba diving, but about the whole concept of the ocean, why it's important to us. My name is Robert Mach, I'm director of Sea Shepherd Austria. My passion is everything related to the ocean, be it scuba diving, be it marine mammals, marine life in general. Sea Shepherd is protecting the Mediterranean Sea, for example, with our current campaign Operation CISO, but there are also onshore campaigns like Operation Siracusa, where we basically do surveillance in a national park. Operation CISO is named after the sperm whale CISO, which died in 2017 entangled in an illegal net in the Mediterranean. So, starting in 2018, we went out to get illegal fishing gear out of the Mediterranean. CISO is about pulling FADs and illegal drift nets from the Mediterranean. The big challenge on Operation CISO is that there are an estimate of over 10,000 FADs just in the Tyrrhenian Sea alone. in the whole Mediterranean, that equates to hundreds and hundreds of tons of plastic. So with our 2 ships, we can make a start of cleaning up the whole thing, but we have possibly years to go if we do it on our own. Operation CISO is on one hand important to get plastic pollution out of the sea, because every FAD has like a kilometer of fishing line, of nylon line attached to it to keep it on one place in the sea. And this degrades over time. If it gets ripped loose by a storm or whatever, then marine life can get entangled in it. Also, turtles get entangled in it while it's still in place. So in removing those FADs, we save a number of lives. River pollution is not only bad for the river, but also for the ocean, as everything that goes into a river goes into the ocean at some point. With the term runoff, we mean basically the fertilizers that go on fields and go into groundwater, then into rivers, then into the ocean. And as on land, fertilizer in the sea leads to plankton blooms, which is basically in the first place, it seems like a good thing because plankton produces oxygen. But when you have this improportional mass of plankton, at some point it dies, it sinks to the ground and it starts to decompose. And this uses the bacteria that decomposes the algae, uses oxygen, and that leads to an ocean dead zone. Animal agriculture is the biggest contributor to ocean dead zones. On the surface, an ocean dead zone doesn't look any different than the sea in general. But when you dive down, especially to the bottom, you will recognize that there's no life. Everything that can swim basically swims away, and every life form that can't swim dies because of the lack of oxygen.
I'm Manuel Marinelli, and I'm a marine biologist from Austria. So my connection to the ocean really started fairly early. I learned snorkeling way before I learned swimming. I was always more confident with goggles and fins on my feet. But when I was about 5 years old, my parents took me on vacation to Sri Lanka and I saw corals for the very first time. And basically that second it was over. I think I fell in love with all the colors, all the life, everything that I saw there. And ever since then I kept saying I'm going to be a marine biologist, very much to everyone's entertainment, sitting in Austria. And eventually it worked out. So what we are working on right now is really cleaning up a big, massive mess that we all collectively made. So ultimately trying to find long-term solutions for the existing problems of pollution, climate change, habitat loss, all the above and many more. Project Manaya is my own little NGO that I founded a couple of years ago with the wish of focusing less on exposing the problem, but rather trying to find a solution. Marine pollution has been one of the topics we've been working on from the beginning, really. And one of the tricks was always that you collect so much trash, but there's very little you can do with it other than hoping that it finds a recycling center. So we finally found a solution to at least recycle plastic bottles. So basically we collect them from the beach, then we cut them into stripes, and you can make filament out of it that then again you can use in a 3D printer and make virtually anything you want out of it. The thing is, I wish I could tell you how I experienced the protection of the Mediterranean Sea, but after now 34 years of coming to the Mediterranean Sea every single year, and the last 5 years living here non-stop, I can't think of a single experience where I witnessed the actual protection of the Mediterranean Sea. I can tell you lots of examples where people failed to protect the Mediterranean Sea, where governments failed, where fishermen failed, where authorities just straightforward messed it up. But even as I keep thinking about it, I can't come up with a single example where a government or any entity stepped up and said, hey, you can't do that because we need to protect this area. Not a single one. That's horrifying, actually. Well, the law of the seas works to an extent. I mean, there's obviously the big stuff, as in, all right, if I see a boat coming from this direction, I'll let him go. So rules of the road works. Otherwise, well, there would be a lot more accidents out there. So everything that's directly linked to humans, as in our well-being, works well. When it comes to the well-being of the ecosystem, not so much. I mean, there's regulations or there's agreements that were agreed on globally that certain fishing methods should not work anymore or should not be used anymore. And then, well, there's people who just don't stick to it. I'm not even going to say there's countries that don't stick to it. It might just well be companies. I mean, the European Union is playing along in that game. And that's maybe news for many people from Europe. I know in Austria, every time I do presentations anywhere, people say, oh, no. All the fisheries, that's Asia. The biggest fishing fleet in the world belongs to the EU. Just to put it out there. And the EU is one of the bad ones when it comes to bottom trawling, which is banned in many countries, not international, but in many countries it is already banned, and the EU is bottom trawling the entire coast of Africa, which is part of the reason why there's pirates now around Somalia, and why there's pirates starting on the other coast, because that's where the EU is catching all the fish. Protection status of all the so-called protected areas is questionable. So what you would really need if you want to protect the habitat and the biodiversity of an area is you need to give them, first of all, a diverse habitat. So many of the national parks we have in the Mediterranean are very close to coast, very shallow. We have very little deep water areas that are protected. And that obviously benefits certain species. So laws that would, in theory, benefit the way the commercial fishing works. So one that would make a huge difference, I believe, would be if a law was decided that a fishing boat, doesn't matter what size, whatever they catch, they have to bring to land. Because a lot of the fish that's caught is actually thrown back into the sea and never shows up anywhere on paper. So on the paper, it was never caught. In reality, still dead. So every fisherman, every boat has to bring all the catch they catch back to land and show for it. So that would be one big one. And the other one would be to have very strict catch rates. And by that, I don't mean, well, I don't mean time windows. I mean, for one, geographic limitations. So we need designated areas where there's no fishing going on ever. So properly reinforced marine protected areas. But also outside these areas, we need catch rates. So once we know how much fish we actually have, which right now nobody knows, and how would you? But once we work that out, even roughly, there has to be a limit to every single fish. And we do have catch limits, for example, for many tuna species, for salmon species, for many of the fish species we are catching, there is limits. The trouble is, so many others are catching the same fish and they throw them back in the water dead. So we catch a lot more as it is. If that's not the case, then you can have limits and then you can actually stick to them because you know exactly what's being pulled out. And once you have those three together, which I think would be a massive, big, amazing start, then the real hassle begins because you have to make sure that everybody actually sticks to those rules. And how that is done beats me. A lot more reinforcement, a lot more money has to go into it, and a lot more boats have to be out there checking on those things. Because right now, it's a sad excuse for a check out there. I mean, being checked anywhere outside of 12 miles from any coast is like winning the lottery. No, usually doesn't happen.
My name is Sandra Bratschun. I'm a marine biologist. I'm working at a marine biology station at the Mediterranean Sea as an instructor. There I'm teaching a lot of young people where I can share my love and my passion for the underwater world with them. However, my heart does not only beat for teaching, but in general for science. I love to find answers to open questions. I am gripped by curiosity and I want to find answers and to understand connections. There's still so much to see and to discover in the sea. By sharing my knowledge and experience, I want to raise awareness about the threats of the ocean. Because once you understand how things work, you want to know more about it. And only then you establish an emotional bond, which is the key to protecting the environment. On one hand, I want to show the beauty of the underwater world, share my fascination and enthusiasm, but I also have to talk about the threats of this habitat and what can be done to preserve it. I want to lead my example by not just looking, but also acting. Education is a privilege. Not everybody has the same opportunity to get proper education. It is very important for me to share my knowledge and to be a role model for young people, independent of their background or origin. How are you supposed to know how to behave in nature respectfully if nobody explains it to you? How can I blame them? By talking to young people and showing them the underwater world, they will independently discover plants and animals. They will start to understand the connection of the living world, and suddenly they will find answers to complex questions. Their enthusiasm, curiosity, and confidence will grow. They begin to open their hearts to a completely unfamiliar world and feel more and more connected with nature. You only start to love what you understand. You only start to protect what you love, and I am convinced by that.
Low oxygen zones can have different reasons. One reason can be the increase of sewage entering the marine environment due to tourism. Most of the small towns along the Mediterranean don't have a sewage treatment plant or only an inefficient one.
I love underwater photography. With my camera, I take a closer look. I'm grateful for this experience. Shiny, colorful animals grow on walls. Others live a hidden life in crevices and holes. The open water is home for uncountable schools of fish. I love it. I am fascinated especially by small organisms that are often hidden. Searching for them, finding them, I feel like Sherlock Holmes underwater. There's plankton floating invisibly for the human eye, crabs hiding in between tentacles of sea anemones, or tiny fish hidden in rocks, taking care of their eggs. The microorganisms are often underestimated. They're at the base of the food web. They are the food source for a lot of animals. Without them, top predators would have a tough time, and so would we.
The diving school Dive Together decided to do something for the environment in 2014. After 2 years of brainstorming and search for a knowledgeable partner, the marine field station of Mare Mundi and Dive Together opened. I was the first marine ecologist working here. With the support of Robert Hofrichter, founder of Mare Mundi, I created presentations to show the underwater world at the coastline of Plakias. These presentations create an understanding of the importance of different ecosystems and their inhabitants. My name is Martina Holzknecht and I'm a marine ecologist and a diving instructor. And my passion is the sea, everything about it. The sound of waves hitting the shoreline, its smells and the life underneath the surface. I feel connected to the ocean because it calms me down. I feel relaxed and at the same time excited about all life underneath the surface. The weightlessness and calmness I experience when underwater is a feeling of freedom. A key ecosystem of the Mediterranean Sea are Posidonia oceanica meadows. These special habitats are sadly declining over the whole Mediterranean. For my master thesis, I had the chance to study the molluscan community in one of these meadows. The habitat located at Palligramnos Wall was in very good condition, and I found an incredible amount of 109 species, of which 4 were aliens. This shows that Posidonia oceanica hosts a high biodiversity.
ignorance of the importance of, for example, the Posidonia seagrass is one of the major reasons why it is put at threat. So a lot of people, general public, tourists or even locals don't know about it, and some of them even believe that it's an invasive algae that it needs to be tiered off. And some of them, for example, will believe that anchoring on seagrass meadow is more efficient than anchoring on sandy bottoms. So you can really see that just by telling them or communicating that it resolves already a lot of problems, let's say, because then they will by themselves actually change their behavior in order to act now knowingly on what they're doing or not.
So the few sensitive habitats that we have in the Mediterranean, well, being meadowbeds and, well, seagrass mostly. Honestly, in the Mediterranean it's mostly seagrass and some small growing or small and slow growing coral genus. In theory, they do have a protection status, and in theory they are untouchable. So you shouldn't be touching them, messing with them, dropping your anchor in them, any of those. In reality, the reinforcement of the regulation is tiny to non-existent. So yes, in Spain, especially Balearic Islands, you can get massive fines for dropping your anchor in the seagrass. Great thing, big supporter of that. But in Croatia, Italy, Slovenia, Greece, nothing. So even if you are in the middle of the national park and drop the anchor in the seagrass, no fine.
So Posidonia oceanica, this endemic plant to the Mediterranean Sea, is basically a superhero. It hosts thousands of species, releases oxygen into the water column. It prevents beach erosion, both at sea, but also when it naturally stranded on the beaches. It is also one of the ecosystems with the greatest capacity for carbon dioxide capture, which is one of the major components of climate change and global warming. Here on the island of Corsica, we estimated that the island was neutral in terms of carbon prints thanks to the Posidonia meadows that live around it. So it's a huge deal nowadays, and there are only good reasons to protect it and to keep it safe from the different human pressures that it is facing today. And also remember that the sea starts on land, and so even at home you can start carrying the sea, because every chemical product, all the waste and the plastic will eventually probably finish in the ocean. So to also take care and keep that in mind, that for example if you live close to the city and you use detergents or whatever harsh chemical products, well, the wastewater treatment can treat part of it, but if it's not biodegradable, it will ultimately end up in the sea. So yeah, that's something that is not very clear in the mind of the people, but actually everything forms just one: land, climate, the water, the sea, the ocean. And when you take care of one part of it, then you actually take care of everything of it.
For my daughter, I wish that she can experience the ocean as I did, full of life, excitement and calmness.